We usually stop right at the outfield. All right. Welcome to another edition of Everyone Hates Cleveland. I've got the microphone out for you watching on YouTube. You can see my Yeti. We're firing up the podcast once again. Of course, we talk about them all year. Yay. We're all excited about them until about February 1st when we just want the games to start. So we'll try to get them all done by February 1st. Today, Mike, we're going to talk about catchers. Yay.
Jim, February 1st is in like 10 days.
Gosh,
Jim's like, let's set an unattainable goal again.
We're going to have to fly. We can do this. We don't have to do anything else. Nothing at all. Catcher. Yay. What are you drinking? You're drinking something that looks good.
Drinking Land Shark. You already criticized it. So I have some takes before we get into this. I always have takes. Conway's generally my favorite beer when I campaign for year round at Great Lakes. Have to admit that this year's Conway's run has not been great.
Ooh.
Every year
we haven't had
beer. It's decent. It's solid still.
We haven't had this conversation. I'm a little shocked. I'm going to pull you onto the Nosferatu train. Go Nosferatu. They just mock me now. I post it and they retweet it and they mock me. Mock me, Mike Hattery.
So like Nos is like really good too, but like the one thing with Great Lakes, they just like their runs are inconsistent. Like some years the Christmas sale is really good, some years it sucks. This year it was pretty good.
It was actually pretty good this year. I will agree with you on that.
I enjoyed it this year. Nos is usually pretty stable. Conway's was always really stable, and then this year I was like, whoa, this is just an average beer, not a really good beer. What's going on?
This is probably their FU, Mike. This was all because of you. I didn't have one. I feel bad. I guess I don't feel bad anymore.
Remedy that tonight.
All right. Maybe we should start talking about a new brewery, Great Lakes. Something to think about. I don't know. Maybe that'll be our next podcast. All right. Catchers. Yay. So, Mike, this is the third year in a row we've done this. And third year in a row, the two primary catchers should be probably Yan Gomes and Roberto Perez. Although, suspiciously over the past few days, we find out that, Francisco Mejia is a catcher. Who knew? He's not going to play third base. And, of course, Eric Haase is sitting there as well. So, Mike, before we start talking about who our catcher is going to be and why, let's talk about, I don't know, why we still are talking about Yan Gomes and Roberto Perez. Why didn't we see a trade from surplus this year from our catcher position?
Well, Jim, money's tight, and when money's tight, you make sure that you can pay Yan Gomes and Michael Brantley a combined $20 million. That's what I do.
Especially when you have two guys who could make way less than that. It's not like, I don't know. Is it that Yan Gomes, let's be serious. Is it that Yan Gomes, if you're going to dump Jason Kipnis' salary, right? Why wouldn't you then dump, Yan Gomes' salary? Just a thought.
I don't know. I'm not sophisticated enough to respond to these sorts of questions, Jim.
This is also going to piss off.
So complex.
It's going to piss what?
So complex.
That statement is really complex. I can't go there. All right,
I'm limited in what I can say.
Let's start with who do you think we should start with? Because I think this year is probably the first year that is a legitimate. Now, last year, I'm pretty sure if you go back to our catcher positional preview, we probably bet the farm that Yan Gomes was not going to be the primary catcher, and he was the primary catcher. If I ask you the question, who's going to be our primary catcher, I know who you're going to say. I know who I'm going to say because it's me. Are we going to be wrong again?
What's really weird is like this year again, Gomes, last year he wasn't, so it kind of made sense. But this year, Gomes is healthy for the postseason, and Perez gets more postseason starts. Like that sort of seems like it should matter in the regular season, right? Like,
well, it should, but when you play, when you put your finger in your mouth and you play the wind, it's hard to say. It's hard to say. So let's talk Roberto. Let's talk about Roberto Perez. Is he finally going to be the Indians' primary catcher? Are we going to look at an even split? And I can't fathom the plan with Francisco Mejia is to have him sitting in Columbus all year. So will there come a point when something dramatic happens?
Oh, Jim, something dramatic is always happening when we're involved, I would say.
They're trading Gomes for Machado, aren't they? Straight up.
I don't know I just don't understand this team. Perez is a far better defensive catcher, right?
Correct.
It's not,
absolutely. Listen. Okay. Gomes does things well. I mean, he's got a great arm. He doesn't frame like he used to. He doesn't move like he used to. Whereas Perez does all of those things very well. So defensively, clearly, Perez far ahead of Yan Gomes.
Gomes is I think he's sort of like a loss of there was a period where like there was this massive variation in the skill of pitch framers and it wasn't very tightly confined. And at that time, Gomes was like above average because there were still like 15 starting catchers who were really bad. But one of the things with pitch framing is like teams have attacked this need. And so what's happened is the skill capacity of the players in terms of pitch framing has narrowed dramatically over the course of the last 2 years. So Gomes is no longer a good pitch framer. Perez is just exceptional at it. And so that's something that's sort of, I think we don't talk about enough is, Gomes was at a point like a good pitch framer when it wasn't something that was like publicly happening. But when the change existed and like the skill gap narrowed, he suddenly became average to below average. Anyway, I guess that's not that interesting. I was interested by it. But I don't get the goal anymore. I don't get what we're doing anymore.
Well, let me ask you this. You asked me the defensive question, so let me ask you the offensive question. And I guess it's going to be offensive, so we can use that. We can use it with both meanings. Offensively, what is their difference at this point?
I guess Gomes hits a few more home runs, a few more doubles.
But does so there's a little bit of a power increase. But have we ever seen Roberto Perez given a chance to get consistent at bats in the regular season, other than 2 years ago when we got to see kind of a glimpse of what he could be if he got regular at bats? Haven't really gotten to see that since then. So is it possible that the norm for Perez is maybe a tick higher than we think, just because he's never really been given the chance to be the guy?
Yeah, I definitely think he's like a usage player in that if he gets regular PAs, he looks better. I mean, he has outstanding discipline, which always adds to a lineup. And he has, he has some contact authority issues, but when he like makes good contact, he hits it out. I mean, I don't know. I think he can be like a fine, like 85 WRC plus player, slightly below average, but for the catching position, that's really rock solid. And when you're the best framer and when you're a top 5 framer and top 5 thrower and great game caller, like it's a really rock solid starting catcher. Gomes is just, you worry too, like about the receiving skills declining. They're not flat. Receiving skills, I think, decline faster than receiving skills in second base. I think really can decline. I really like Yan Gomes. He's had some fun moments, and for a guy who came back from what was the wilderness like 2 years ago, he seems like a really likable dude who I've been really happy was productive last year. And it's probably not fair for me to crap on Gomes. He's a useful big league catcher. It's just when you can run out a good big league catching staff for $2 million instead of $9 million, why not do that? I guess really just the question. Especially if you can't spend money on, I don't know, a market that's like falling right into your lap if you're a medium market to small market team.
So especially, and that's not even, I mean, that's discounting the fact that we have Mejia, who played in September with the big league club. We have Eric Haase, who has made several statements in the past 18 months about being a productive offensive player, not that has a defensive skill level as well. If for a team that seems to always try to maximize money, when we see a move, I think the Michael Brantley signing, and I get hit hard a lot for my complaints about the Michael Brantley signing because I complain about it a lot. But the fact of the matter is, every positional preview that we talk about, this one, we're hitting first base next, Michael Brantley has affected based upon that salary that we've taken in. You mentioned it on our WFNY TV, the spot that we did right before this. I mean, have the Indians really locked themselves in a strategy that goes against what we've been talking about for the past 5 or 6 years, Mike, where the Indians used to try to maximize the market? Does it seem to you, with Gomes not being moved when they have depth, and you have a guy like Michael Brantley on the roster, hasn't that sort of locked them in? I mean, is this odd for you? I mean, the stammering that we're doing, I just don't even know where to go with this. It just seems weird to me.
Yeah. I think it could signal a couple of things. One of them is a clubhouse role. Another is, I think, the not trading Gomes and the willingness to move Mejia to third signals they're might be pretty unready to move him, to make him like a full-time catcher in Cleveland. I mean, he has taken a ton of defensive knocks there, receiving and game calling wise. Sometimes people just think he's not a high effort guy behind the plate. So, I mean, I think he's very talented. He has a hose. His receiving skills aren't good yet. I get it. I sort of also wonder if the Indians just shifted Mejia back to, lock him in behind the plate and are trying to move him. I think he's someone who may have had, if he can play catcher for 130 games, and his battle play back there really, really well because of the positional adjustments, but he's a tiny dude. I do wonder if the Gomes stuff just has to do with they don't really trust turning 100 games over to Mejia this year when they're trying to win a World Series. I mean, I don't know. We watched the Yankees, and I know the Yankees made a nice run, but we watched the Yankees have pretty significant issues with Gary Sanchez catching games in the playoffs. I mean, it's a problem. He's a really bad receiver, and I sort of wonder if, the Indians aren't ready to make that gamble on Mejia behind the plate at some points in the playoffs.
So, but I mean, at the same time, it doesn't seem like they're ready to move much of anything. I mean, we hear a lot of rumblings, and I mean, I the problem with, keeping a guy like Gomes and a guy like Perez both, especially with that salary, is it's not likely that they're going to be dealing a Gomes in July if they're making a run at the playoffs, just because. Is this at all to do with, in years past, Mike, I've been a big proponent of the fact that perhaps a pitching staff is almost demanding of perhaps keeping Gomes just because of the relationships that he has with the starting rotation. But it's clear to me, especially over the past year, about year and a half, that Roberto Perez has most definitely become the same sort of guy with that rotation. I've been watching Perez guys in the minor leagues for years, as have you. I mean, that excuse is almost gone by the wayside, right? Or is it possible that he's a guy that in a clubhouse run by Terry Francona, that they're looking at perhaps moving Gomes as maybe tilting the rotation a little bit?
Yeah, I think you're really right. I do think the other explanation I would give if I was the Indians is that this market has played out so cheap that Gomes' contract, while super affordable, doesn't look that interesting on this market. I mean, he's a solid starting catcher, but $7 million for him on a market where people just are not getting paid. I mean, maybe that's a reason why Gomes hasn't gotten moved.
Yeah. I mean, this market, I could probably send you down some pathways here, but this is a very strange market that might actually be working out for Kansas City really well. But at the end of the day, should all of these salaries come down? All right. So we haven't talked about Eric Haase. I know you've had a chance to talk to him and to see him up close and personal over the past year. What are his chances this year? Obviously, he's the better catcher between he and Mejia, but that batch certainly in this fly ball revolution has certainly taken a leap forward as a potential power bat down the road. I mean, is there a chance that we see him this year just because he provides a little more defense and his offense is certainly seems to have that major league feel to it?
Yeah, I hope we see him. I really like smart guys who make adjustments. Is that, like, I don't know. It's really fun to watch. I mean, you've gotten to watch more savants than I have, like the freakish athlete who just and Lindor's so special because he's both, right? And Haase isn't as, Haase is not, he's a really good athlete, but he's not a freak, but he's just really bright about making adjustments. He spent all of last season, working on getting the bat head out farther to the point of contact in order to elevate the ball more. He's a really strong dude, despite the fact of not being that massive. He is just 20 home run plus power. He has a decent eye at the plate. His biggest flaw is he strikes out a little bit too much, and that can be problematic. But if you're playing him 60 times, he runs into 10 dingers and plays good defense. That's a really good backup catcher, and I think that's what the Indians have at worst with Haase.
But I mean, what are they going to do? I mean, so here's the thing, though. What are they going to do with him? He's played a year and a half at AA. They bumped him up a little bit to AAA last year. I mean, this isn't going to. I mean, what are they going to do with two catchers? What are they going to do with two catchers at Columbus?
I don't know. I think the problem is, well, the first thing is just not a lot of top. The positive for the Indians is there isn't a lot of top-heavy offensive talent in the Indians minor league system. So, and the other thing with catcher, thankfully, is, I mean, even when catchers play fullish seasons, they're playing 120 games. So I think they'll do that traditional, like, Mejia will catch 80 to 90 games. Haase will catch 60 to 70. Mejia still has the priority over him in terms of refining his defensive skills, and then Haase will DH or play first base the rest of the time, which is actually semi-interesting to me, at least, if you buy into Haase's adjustments, because he can make a really cool-looking platoon partner for Yonder Alonso halfway through the season if he plays decent defense at first and plays catcher. So I don't know. They have so much depth at this position. Mejia is the guy that can be the future star, but his receiving skills just, I don't think, are going to be there for the 2018 season. His bat's big league ready. It has been since like July of last year. I don't know what you do. And I don't know if they also aren't making Mejia like a part of the opening day roster and keeping Gomes and Perez because they want him to get everyday catching duties, basically catch 80% of games. But then that harms Haase, and Haase is one of the top 12 prospects in the system. It is a jumbled mess. And I don't think they handled it well. I don't know if they handled it poorly.
Well, it's certainly, it's good to have surplus. So let's go back to the big I think we could probably, you and I being prospect beatniks, we could probably have a lot more fun talking about the Columbus catchers than the Indians catchers, but we do have to get into percentages here, Mike. I mean, looking forward, and again, taking into account that we know that Tito Francona does tend to use the first couple of months as kind of an extended spring training. Looking down the road, percentage wise, like, do you see a 50-50 split with Gomes and Perez this year? Or are we finally going to get to see that tilt in Perez's direction? Or is it going to be 100% directed to health, being that both of these guys have had health concerns over the past 3 seasons on and off, even though Gomes last year made a nice bounce back, actually, both fairly healthy for the year. But what's your call? Another year into this, are we going to see another 50-50 split? Are we going to give these guys certain pitchers to catch? Or are we going to see finally that tilt to Roberto Perez?
I think we see it tilt to Roberto, but not by much. I think we're going to see like 55-45, 60-40 at most. the health thing is a huge deal. I mean, Gomes has had multiple significant injuries. Perez is, what is it? He had Bell's palsy, and one or two other freak injuries. I think, it's going to largely be determined by health. I think if they were both healthy for a full year, there'd be a slight edge to Perez, just because it just seems like pitchers are more comfortable with him. And I don't know. But I think there's like a curse of average with those two. Like, I really like Roberto, and I think he can be like somewhere between catcher number 10 and 20 in Major League Baseball in terms of value. But like, Gomes can be 15 to 20. It's a really marginal gap depending on the guy you like.
I think we both can agree, though, this is probably the last year that we're talking about these two as being the only guys. I think with the upside of Mejia and Haase coming up, I think obviously these two guys are going to feel a little bit of heat, and maybe that will help. I don't know. Rotation-wise, Mike, I think as long as we have our top 3 or top 4 guys there, it seems to me that they're going to be pretty settled with these two. And honestly, I'm pretty content with it. I grew up with mostly defensive catchers, so I'm not looking for a guy behind the plate to be pounding balls. And both of these guys do bring a little something defensively, and I think they call a good game. And I know I just think with Callaway moving on, and I know you're not as high on Callaway as perhaps I am, and I've heard a couple of things this offseason that's made me kind of maybe steer your direction. It just feels to me that the Indians are looking, I guess, at the catcher position to be kind of the stability. Could Carl Willis play into all this?
I like the stability sale. That makes sense. I mean, I think that's definitely fair. I don't know. And I'm not super low on Callaway. One of those, it's like that conversation. We have a conversation every year about like, how the hell do you value certain roles? Like manager, like how the hell do you value it? Like, it's really hard to put a number on it. And I think like pitching coaches are the same way. We know that there are like a handful who we think are really, really good. But one of the tough things, look, the Indians rotation has been awesome with Callaway. Also, like, and he's done a really good job. It's just like one of those ones where, like, man, like you would kind of hope someone could help Corey Kluber put it together, or Carlos Carrasco. Like, I don't know. There are guys like Ray Searidge who are like putting guys who throw 92 with like a cutter together, and you just have the most like arm talent in baseball, man.
Yeah, well, crazy. I mean, when
maybe Houston.
When we get to the rotation, I do want to talk a little bit about that, because a lot of things that happened with Carrasco and happened with Kluber happened with another guy, and while Callaway was part of that, there's certainly other conversations we had. All right.
Niebla time.
I like the guy. I cannot. Oh, let's just stop there. All right, Mike, percentages. Let's get it out. Yan Gomes.
Plays what percent? What percentage am I? Oh, plays the season?
Percentage of the year. Yeah.
I think he plays 43% of games.
Oh man, I was gonna say 40%. Okay, we're good there. So going, are you just gonna go straight up these two? What about Perez? Because we got to talk about those two.
You know what? I take that back. I take that back.
You're gonna go low.
I think Gomes plays 30% of games this year.
Oh wow.
I think Berto plays 45%, and I think that Mejia plays 20%, Haase plays 5%.
All right, I'll go 40 and 40 with Gomes and Perez, and I'll go 17 and 3, 17 to Mejia, 3 to Haase.
All right.
And if injury happens, I think that'll get thrown all out the window. And I think as we talk about first base and DH, I think that we could see a scenario where these younger guys maybe pop up in other roles. So we shall see. All right, Mike, I think we kept this under 30 minutes. That is a miracle. Wait till first base. I like first base. That's coming up next. All right. Any last thoughts about catcher, Mike? Your last chance to sing odes about Eric Haase until next year, until next year's position.
I think it's one of the Indians' 3 deepest positions. It's really deep. I don't think you're going to see major problems from it because the Indians can shuffle the deck. I mean, will they shuffle the deck with Francona when they need to? Who knows? But they can shuffle the deck. They have the talent to do it, and that's really positive because we've seen some really weird catchers play games for the Indians in the last 3 or 4 years, like Eric Kratz. There's a long list, so that's positive.
Sicknar Floopstock. That's all I've got to say, and we're going to end it right there. All right.
Process.
Coming up next, first base, and good God, we might just cry for that whole one. I know I am. Carlos.